In the old days when I was in front of a blackboard teaching poetry, some people think you can't teach poetry, and maybe to an extent that's true. You can induce the sort of atmosphere from which poetry can emerge. Of that I feel absolutely certain. Um, One of the ways I would describe poetry would be you take a sentence, a basic grammatical tight sentence, like he kicked the ball over the fence, for example. He cooked. He is the subject. Kicked is the predicate. Kicked what? Kicked the ball, which is the object. Over the fence describes where it was kicked, and hence an adverbial phrase. Now, the thing about poetry is that not only does it get more descriptive, but it breaks up that lineage of grammatical form. So if I said the ancient looking old man kicked the rusty can at the side of the road, then that would be more descriptive. When we get into poetry, we can get into things where uh, things are personified, or you get such a descriptive range in terms of metaphor, analogy, and so on. For example, let's take a look at this here. You've heard of you've heard of soldiers in the war who had a Bible in their chest, and the Bible took the bullet, and that experience changed them. This book here I had in grade 13 English, Anthology of Verse. It has T.S. Eliot, even has Leonard Cohen, a 12-line short poem by Leonard. It has Dylan Thomas, and it was kind of interesting thinking ahead, picturing ahead in terms of my own reality. Given the fact that I was hay season, which fits in perfectly with this Dylan Thomas poem, Fern Hill. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heyday of his eyes, and honored among wagons I was prince of the apple towns. And once below a time I loudly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. A lot of things are happening there. He's imagining himself as a child. Everything is part of his empire, his kingdom. He's king of apples, but you get this sense that time is sort of tumultuous behind all that, and you have to wonder about Dylan Thomas deciding to have a drink in every bar in New York City, and essentially drinking himself to death, given the fact that he was such a beautiful lyrical poet who could capture the essence of childhood and innocence and beauty. The poem Fern Hill ends with these two lines. Time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. And that's an amazing thing. The other things that happened in this poem for me, or in this anthology of poems for me, in terms of awakening my interest in poetry and my interest in existentialism and all that, was T.S. Eliot. Very remarkable, and my favorite poem of all time, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread against the sky, like a patient ether rised upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels. You get this existential thing going on in T.S. Eliot, the fog wrapping around the house, and every minute movement in terms of taking of toast and tea as being totally at odds with one's stance in the cosmos, and rolling the overwhelming question, the existential question, to a fundamental question. Another poem in there, The Hollow Man. We are the hollow man, we are the stuffed man, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. He treats the hollow man as a Greek chorus, and they swing back and forth according to the opinions of the moment, very much like media, the way it manipulates us today. And we get to the point in this poem, sightless unless the eyes reappear, and the perpetual star, multifoliate rose of death's twilight kingdom, the hope only of empty man. Here we go round the prickly pear, the prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. So you get these two things that are highly contrasted between, you know, the Walking Dead going over London Bridge and then coming home from work with their heads down, totally and mournfully muted by the energy that's sucked out of them. And so T.S. Eliot, my major influence. Leonard, every one of his song lyrics is important. And I think that that's the thing, that in a poem, a word can magnify, so that in Fern Hill, you have all sorts of images that crowd upon the scene of being a child and being mesmerized by what's happening in the farm and so on. And but then time closes in on that. So I thought I'd talk about a couple of my poems and read one that I haven't read in a long time, and then talk about the difference between poetry and song. Well, actually, this is a song. I can't remember whether this, I believe it started as a poem, but certain songs emanate a certain frequency of, I guess, you know, minor chord, major chord, whatever the sensibility is that you want to be pervasive in the poem. So solitude, sweet bath of solitude, sweep over my soul. I've been fragmenting, pieced out to the world, been falling down the tunnel, drowning in a swirl. In a sense, the music is already there in the very fabric of the feeling, so that's something that has to come around. I'll be talking about evolution to distinction, and well, whereas other poems like Driving My Car, which became a song, I think it was a song first actually, because I had been at a conference once upon a time. Gary Michael Dalt was there, and I had just read a piece of journalism where some car had followed him home and flashed the lights when he pulled in his driveway in a threatening manner. So this goes, I was driving my car late last night with the girl on my right. I had a fight. I can't take this weather, not the blindness, not the madness. I just don't care. And to take that into a song or a poem might stretch the feeling out a little bit. And I'm kind of wanting to hurry up here. So I'm going to read. We're going to go into poetry. We're going to, you know, jackhammer into the brain and figure out what makes a poem. Why does each word have a, you know, a metaphorical resonance? And by breaking down the sentence the way the words sit on the page, makes them all that much more dynamic in terms of the space between words. So this poem is one of my rescued poems. It's called Nice, France, movie set, Sorrentino, take one. Be yourself on a sidewalk of midnight in front of some villa, somewhere away from the masses, the full moon bleeding Mediterranean blue. Stop it for a second, and then we'll pick it up right here. Okay, I thought I should sit down for the rest of this in case it's bad. The full moon bleeding Mediterranean blue, the questions bleeding directly into answers, the sun bleeding into water, the days on the clock bleeding into a finale, hellos bleeding into goodbyes, and too often not to notice, behind the passing fancy, the circumflexive motion that movies are built on, the Kleenex diving into sniffles and red eyes, and flurries of gestures, like we are all children. Cries of lost and found, this we know. It's definitely no way to say goodbye. Or didn't you hear? Now, not so much matters, nothing to fear. The cat out of the bag, the solid ground solstice, grinding to a halt in a different place on the shelf, showing up in Christmas cards, tossed into the shredder, the old days and reckless bin, sticking crosses heavenward for the straggle of believers, the stillborn crusaders who still believe God is love. Still fascinated and framed by dimensions, fostered by card industry, built on Hallmark resolution, at midnight in a kiss against the dark gray sky, a gesture waving long after the fact, the silver silhouettes, the voices of mortals, muffled in their throats, the duty courts clearing the pathway to tomorrow, the sun, a fading aphrodisiac, a daguerreotype insert perhaps, the fingers falling out of touch with faith, in common sense, in dialogue, the stars calling out for more, but knowing more can never be enough, not from where I stand, my foot in the river, looking at you in my rearview mirror, plugging the holes, disappearing into subtlety. The spirits rustling in the green grass, moving the sick and dying to higher ground. The deer and the antelope play, kicking up the earth as they tremble. And I surrender to the drug, no appetite or thirst, nothing, nothing signature. To you, as far as the eye can see, I see this moment. The camera's backtracking, and all the rest, the fear of flying, or the sky opening, and a voice from the deep, calling me forth, the penetrating recognition of the very absolute connection with the very absolute. No excuses. It's prevailing omniscience, omniscience, would you believe? Beyond circumstances, maybe I should have read this before. No excuses, it's prevailing omniscience beyond circumstance, the ponderable affluence beyond the question and the answer, period. Jumping ahead of the Mercedes 300, struggling, jackknifing memories on steep hills, shredding lipstick, we struggle to make reality real, followed suddenly by sharp corners, twists and turns of love, the falling rain somehow in the retina and the other component transplants concocting extraterrestrial strategy. An idea in the fender mirror, seeing me bulletproof 007, throwing the first stone, radicalizing to the beat of my own drum, all these crazy stories, wrapping the shawls around the cold morning, truth implodes, the trail of deep skirts and moccasins, the flower girls and the smoke rising, and the night becomes ashes, and the cameras are weeping, and the crescendo of bird songs become a crossword puzzle by the window tossed. Who can tell the cacophony apart? Who can tell the cacophony apart from what it is? The jambalaya, a painted bird, in some other ancient story, some twist of turquoise, the torches of soldiers pushing faces back in the crowd, picking the entrails of time and space, free of all ideas, and the meandering willows stoop to touch the sacred earth, the ground. The Black River is alive, as any conversation breathing is alive. It's between us, a force to be reckoned, a ribbon of darkness. The consequence leaving a trail of words abandoned. The masked man and the fringe dancers having missionary sex, singing Mac the Knife, battling the white chairs and daring the audience to applaud like we're somewhere unreal, surreal. What do you call the end in your language? 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I sort of messed up parts of this, but the important thing is that in painting, I think you're at least, well, if you're being a graphic drafts person, it's probably 8 points, left brain and 2 points of right brain. But as we get into poetry, we're actually fishing in the right brain for images that then diffuse and bleed into these other words and these other concepts that might inflate something here, there. But you've got the right brain, you've got the left brain. This one is metaphor, this is analogy, this is allegory, this thinks in pictures, this thinks in terms of the overall event horizon. The left brain can only work like a cognitive structure. It depends on cogs in the wheel of logistics, of grammar, of being able to say this is a subject and this is a verb and this is an object and so on. So that the strategy of a poem is to actually break up the concrete, break it up and let those fragments fly apart and see whether you can attach any meaning to them. And then you can go on and evolve the stance of any particular word into a series of words, into more metaphor, and to alliterative, all sorts of things that can come together that are going to usher that poem into a mind. A mind, the more left brain it is, the less receptive it will be to poetry. And that's why the business world despises poetry. Okay, so the songs that we're going to on the next 3 Showtime podcasts are songs that my wife or myself have written. And some of those stem directly from poetry, like Windy Hill of Sand was written probably not too long after, I graduated from high school, if after. And that so translated into a song, 20-some years later. Evolution to Distinction, the one I'm going to play now, doesn't seem to be in my Burnt Offering book. It's important to me because I tried to put something there about the fragility of life, sort of like Leonard Cohen's Bird on a Wire, that things aren't as steadfast sometimes as one would like, and that's a problem. So I'll put this song on. On some of the songs are slightly different volume, and I've simply put them to abstract video. Meaning that video that I shot some recently and some not so recently in a way that the imaging shouldn't distract from whatever the song is. So and later on, after we've actually learned how to write poetry and write songs, I'll do an orientation where I will start doing cinematography appropriate to the song. And in the mood of the song and the choreography of the song. So evolution to distinction, resolve, and unresolved. And the night is true, I do love you. When the night is true, I do love you. But the rest of the time, I believe I'm losing my mind. Too many humans know it, drumming up the void with their vocal cords. Alien symmetry. Alien symmetry. Context affirmative, curtain closing, the end of the mystery, and how our history is served. I pluck a flower for an hour, and it gives me some idea is underfoot and what is driving me. The lingo of the false ones, doctrines and religion. resuscitate, to mouth my madness. Evolution to distinction, revolution to conviction. And the interesting thing is, I did the music on this. Obviously it's pretty simple on the keyboard, but again, music can amplify or deflate, contrast, or raise up. Down the question marks, I salute the officer in charge. Look embarrassed, ghost in the dark. Mirror man, he's always mean, and it's kind of hard to bury him. Darkness of the heart is a stake driving us apart. So I believe in the sentence, hang around for the execution. There's no other way, no solution. So that the whole idea there in terms of its parallel to Bird in the Wire is that the character keeps flipping out. He's on this tightrope, and one moment he can believe it, but he can wake up in the middle of the night and disbelieve the very same thing. So that ambiguity, that seesaw of sacred and profane, of various dichotomies that always invade any interpersonal human situation, and poetry. You know, if you want to write a poem, write one about a friend who's gone away and you're no friend with anymore, or a lover, or somebody who's died, or something to conjure up that type of emotion.